Greetings, distinguished followers, chosen chimp here, presenting to you what is undoubtedly the laziest form of content that I have ever produced, for I just sit on the sofa and record rather than make the effort of going upstairs and setting up my studio properly. So I'm talking about the Sea Devils re-edit, this 90-minute rework of the original classic Doctor Who story, The Sea Devils, which has been created in order to hype up this brand new Doctor Who spin-off, The War Between the Land and the Sea. And this re-edit fascinates me for two reasons. The first is that The Sea Devils is a classic Doctor Who story that's very close to my heart personally. This is one of the ones I watched over and over again when I was a child. Back in the 90s, they repeated it on BBC Two and did it the old-fashioned hard way of televising one episode each week for 6 weeks. And probably, maybe alongside The Demons and Spearhead from Space, I would say that this is the Pertwee story that I have watched the most times out of all other Pertwee stories. And the second reason why this project interests me so much is because I've developed an ongoing fascination with these 90-minute reworkings of classic stories. And the last one that I covered was, well, the last one that was created, and that was the colorized re-edit of the War Games. And with the colorized re-edit of the War Games, there was actually quite a lot to talk about. You had the obvious transition from black and white to colour, you had the added practical effects, you had the added implication that the war chief was indeed the master in a previous incarnation. Controversial, I know. And you also had that brand spanking new regeneration scene between Troughton and Pertwee at the end. So there was a lot for me to sink my teeth into with that particular rework. And with the Sea Devils re-edit, there's not quite so much. It's basically exactly what it says on the tin. It's a 90-minute slimline version of the original with not a great deal else to talk about, although there are things that I will go into. So as I said, I've watched the Sea Devils a lot over the years that I have been alive, and therefore I was quickly able to gather an intuitive sense of the rhythm and the changes of this new re-edit. And going into watching this, there were three things that I desperately wanted out of this. I wanted it to retain the complex relationship between the Doctor and the Master, because the opening handful of scenes between the Doctor and the Master implies a level of friendship between the two characters that isn't touched on quite so much in any of the classic season 8 stories between the Doctor and the Master, and therefore the Sea Devils was a bit of a game changer for Doctor Who lore in that respect. So I wanted them to retain that in all its glory. The other thing I wanted them to retain was the hard and somewhat dangerous work of the Havoc stunt team. The Havoc stunt team being a department of stunt performance that Doctor Who hired on an ongoing basis pretty much throughout Classic Series 8. And Havoc, to my recollection, featured in pretty much every story, bar possibly one or two, in Series 8, performing lots of crazy diving off buildings, mad explosions, people rolling down hills, and the likes. And again, to my knowledge, I think Series 9 it only had one episode featuring the Havoc stunt team, and that was the Sea Devils. And the third thing that I wanted from this was that I wanted this re-edit to retain the contribution of a one Mr. Declan Mulholland. Declan Mulholland was the guy who plays Clark on the oil rig. The sea, the sea, the Sea Devils, Hickman! You know, that guy. And when I was doing my review of the original Sea Devils, which I made a couple of years ago, one of my subscribers brought to my attention that Declan Mulholland, there's a bit of a secret history with this guy because the same actor also played Jabba the Hutt in the original Star Wars movie in a scene that would ultimately be deleted. And in this scene, Jabba the Hutt was just a normal looking dude, and they cut that scene out. But for the remastered versions of the late 90s and a bit later on when they brought out the DVD releases, they reintroduced that scene, but now they CGI'd over Declan with the new computer-generated, slimy, sluggish Jabba the Hutt, and just wiped out his voice as well. Retained the dialogue as far as I'm aware, but the voice is not Declan Mulholland's. And I kind of thought it would be a bit of a tragedy if this Doctor Who re-edit was to do the same. But I'm pleased to say they kept it all in. They retained it perfectly. The relationship between Doctor and Master, the Havoc stunts, the great acting of Declan Mulholland, who, his character, I do believe, coined the term Sea Devils in a fit of madness, unless he was parroting some old pirate fables or something. All of it's still in there. I quickly gathered the impression that the crew putting this re-edit together really liked the original Sea Devils and wanted to retain as much of the special quality of that original 6-part classic story as they could, and in that respect they did a wonderful job. Things that I was immediately able to notice that they cut out were the opening scene of a naval vessel in distress, where you get a kind of POV shot of a Sea Devil, even though you don't know that's what it is at the time, and a commander desperately squawking down a microphone before coming face to face with this creature and then blurting out a very satisfyingly guttural scream. That's gone completely. In this version, it cuts straight to Joe and the Doctor bobbing around on the boat. When they get to the prison, there was a whole section in the original where one of the guards is supposedly hypnotized by the Master, but then the guard no-sells it, which implies that the Master's hypnotism is no longer working or is somehow faulty, even though it was probably the Master's plan all along, etc., etc. That's gone. And there's also a scene a bit later on where they're having the fencing fight, which again, all of it remains intact, which I'm so happy about because I love that fencing scene. The charisma that John Pertwee and Roger Delgado put into that very physical performance, it is just wonderful. It's timeless. It's such good fun. And the only bit they cut out was the end cliffhanger of the original episode when the Master throws a concealed knife at the Doctor, and then it ends, and then in the next episode you see that it's actually just hit the wall next to the Doctor's head. That's been removed completely. I guess they don't want to do anything involving knives in this day and age, which I'm not going to cuss them for that. One of the things they added, which I thought was a good touch, was when the Doctor and Joe have planted themselves in the rig after first encountering a Sea Devil, and the Doctor is explaining to Joe what exactly this species of creature is. There are some brief flashbacks to certain scenes from the Silurians, just to add context to what it is the Doctor is referring to, i.e. a previous Doctor Who story. A bit later on towards the end, when the Doctor gets kidnapped a second time by the Sea Devils, this time with the help of the Master, you get this rather interesting looking exterior shot of what I can only assume is some kind of... So I've hastily deleted whatever twaddle I said there, because on looking at this object a bit more diligently, it has become clear to me that this can only be a depiction of the no man's land fort in the Solent near Portsmouth as it would have looked in the 70s. It was originally a fort up until 2015, where it was reopened as a hotel, a kind of novelty
retreat. It's got to be that, right? It can't be anything else. Now, in the actual story, in the original story, it was where Clark and Hickman were based, and I assumed that when the Doctor and Joe were rescued in the helicopter, that it never featured in this story again. However, the fact that this shot um, is put in as an establisher just after the Doctor and the Sea Devils, sorry, the Master and the Sea Devils recapture the Doctor on the beach, implies that this is in fact also where the Sea Devils base is, which confuses the heck out of me because I always thought the second time they go into the Sea Devils base, it's meant to be underwater, right? So, but they've got this shot of what can only be the No Man's Land fort. It's got to be the No Man's Land fort, right? There's nothing else that this object can be, and yet that means that the Sea Devils set up their base of operations in the fort where Clark and Hickman were. This has completely thrown out the window everything I thought I knew about this story. Anybody who knows what I'm waffling on about here, please clarify. Anyway, it's a cool image. Back to me.
So now I'm going to get on to the big deal breaker for me, which was the thing that I was the most interested in going into watching this, and that was the added sound. What always mystified me about the Sea Devils, particularly when I was researching it for my review that I did a couple of years ago, is the sound effects were done by one person and the music was done by another person, and there are times in that story where I found it difficult to figure out where the sound stopped and the music began. Like, a lot of the twinkles and the jingles could have been construed as music, as the music itself was so bizarre and abstract and experimental. But I'm guessing that some of the other sound involved the additional noises and tracks that were made to accompany the original sounds and blips. I noticed one of the biggest ones I noticed was when Jo Grant appears at the window and she is signaling to the Doctor her plan to free him from being handcuffed to his chair, and she's doing all these funny little mannerisms things at the window, and this time around there are some little added tunes and jingles and blips which to some might seem a little overcooked, but it is quite fun, so props to that. And also, most importantly, additional sound is some added dialogue. During the battle between the Sea Devils and the naval officers, when the Sea Devils invade the military bases, I noticed there is a moment when one of the Sea Devils clarifies his plan to, I think it's like rendezvous with some of his other colleagues, and he says that, and that definitely wasn't in the original, so that was added to kind of bring some context to why the Sea Devils are wandering around somewhat aimlessly in the original, I guess. But the most important is when the Sea Devils and the Doctor are conversing for the first time in the original underwater base, and there is an added line which is almost seamless because the voice is pretty much bang on identical to the voices of the original Sea Devils, when one of the Sea Devils says something along the lines of, "We will be the victors in the war between the land and the sea." Go figure. So that's all good. That binds it a little bit closer together with this new TV project that is going on now. And by the way, full disclosure, I have, at the time of recording this, seen the first 2 episodes of The War Between the Land and the Sea, but I'm not going to talk about this here now. That's for a separate video. And now I'm going to go on to the ultimate creme de la creme of this re-edit, and that is the music. The Radio Times announced a while back that the original Malcolm Clarke track was going to be fused with a new soundtrack which has been composed by Lorne Balfe. Sorry if I pronounced any of your name wrong, I do apologise. The original soundtrack, this abstract pre-industrial plethora of blips and squeals and clangs and psychedelic 70s madness, is one of my favourite things about the original Sea Devils, and I was really concerned that it was going to get butchered. And in fact, 99% of it has been left in fully intact. These new melodies, these new compositions, I think are great. They're really, really cool pieces of music, and they fit the tone of the piece very well indeed. And again, I think that the brains behind this music had a lot of love and a lot of admiration for what Malcolm Clarke did originally, and therefore it seemed important to them to leave the best parts of his original composition and add something new that complements that. And there it is. Bravo, 10 out of 10 for that. And it works most effectively in the latter stages of this story, like the War Games in colour, and I suppose the Daleks in colour as well. This re-edit benefits from a fair amount of parallel editing between scenes. Rather than cut out too many crucial moments of the plot, they have instead cut down certain pieces of dialogue and intersplice those dialogue moments with other things that are happening at the same time, making the whole narrative a bit more seamless and a bit more fluid. And they do this to marvellous effect in this story when Parliamentary Secretary Walker, what a tit, declares his desire to blow this civilization out of the water. And during his declaration of intent, you actually have the naval officers giving the all clear to fire their missiles into the water. And these things cut together. The music assists with this perfectly when these parallel edits happen, and you've got the music delivering these really kind of melancholic keyboard synth notes, and it really hits home the idea that this human military retaliation is in fact a tragic oversight. Because my one criticism of the original Sea Devils was the fact that it kind of undersold its own premise a little bit. You had John Pertwee's Doctor trying to negotiate with the Sea Devils in the same way that he did the Silurians, failing in those negotiations, asking the Sea Devils one more time if they're willing to cooperate, getting the answer no, and then realising to his own supposed despair that he has no choice but to blow them up, which he does. And when he gets to the surface, he says to one of the naval officers that he did what he had to prevent a war. And then it just ends with him looking a bit frustrated that the Master has escaped. And the whole thing for me has always kind of undercut the idea that this story is supposed to have a sad ending in the same way that the Silurians had a sad ending, because the Doctor tries to broker a piece of the Silurians in that particular story, and it ends with the Brigadier blowing up the Silurians' underground home, and the final shot is the Doctor's face in absolute despair. And this would kind of be parroted much later on in Peter Davison's Warriors of the Deep. And even though the Sea Devils kind of ends in the same way, they don't really have that kind of melancholy ending to it. They sort of left it out, and this wasn't something that they'd have been able to recover for a re-edit, because John Pertwee's response just didn't exist in that story. However, re-editing those battle sequences and having the melancholic music does a great job of hitting home the fact that this is a kind of downbeat story, that it ends on a downbeat message of no kind of victors in a conflict of that caliber. So again, the people behind this re-edit definitely had a real intuitive relationship with the original source material. So all in all, I consider this a humble and worthy reimagining of the original. And I'm just thinking about all the ways that this could have gone wrong. You know, they could have butchered this story beyond recognition. They could have completely wiped clean the soundtrack and replaced it with something generically orchestral and boring. And there was even a small part of me that was worried it would be subjected to some kind of disgusting AI upscaling. Nope, it's all good. It's all there. If you liked the original Sea Devils, then it's very, very likely you're going to like this as well. It's for the Sea Devils fan on the go. if you're sat in bed in the morning in front of your laptop and you want to watch the Sea Devils and your family is sick of you wasting the day because you're in bed and it's like 11 o'clock in the morning and you don't want to spend too much more time, then this is the perfect solution. It's only 90 minutes long and it's a great reworking of a great original story. And again, I'll say it one more time, I'm really grateful that it's so obvious that the people working on this had a lot of love and respect for the original source material. It shows, it's great. If you're skeptical about this re-edit and you love the original, trust me, it's one of the good ones. Just check it out. It's a good reworking. And that pretty much is all I have to say on that. So thank you very much for watching this video. I appreciate your time and audience. And if you want to check me out on social media, then please visit my Blue Sky page at thechosenchimp.bsky.social, or more importantly, come and visit my Patreon, patreon.com/thechosenchimp, where you can become a distinguished follower for just £1 a month and request your Doctor Who topic for coverage. Your name will be mentioned in the video and your contribution will go towards making this channel a bigger, stronger, smarter and generally just less lazy place to be if you're watching me talk about Doctor Who. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon. For the love of Pete and his world, have a good one.